Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Now, over the last few days, we've been fed a fairly steady diet of stuff about the latest Arcane Journal that's coming out for pre-order on Saturday. This being the Raising of Westerland. But today, I've come back home from work to find a new article that provides us with actually some really interesting information. So without any further ado, let's have a look at what this is. Now, the article does lead with some information that we're already broadly familiar with, and that is that the Arcane Journal is going to include a Path to Glory campaign set of rules. Now, previously we've been told that this would have to be combined with the rules from the War of Cetra's Fury, another Arcane Journal, so something else you're going to have to buy, because you need the battle march size forces of 500 to 750 points. However, what we now learn is that this is actually part of a slow grow sort of campaign, and you can build up forces of up to 2,000 points, or actually even more. So this could be something that's really interesting for maybe people getting into playing Warhammer, people wanting to play and build a new narrative-themed army, watching it develop from game to game, or just a fun campaign to do down at the local gaming store or club. I was pretty excited when I first saw there was going to be a Path to Glory campaign, and actually the fact that this expands army sizes as well as allowing veterancy and new rules, etc., to be added to an existing force just whets my appetite even further. Next, we find out that we're going to see changes to the Chaos Marauder and Marauder Horseman profiles. Now, there had been a few rumours floating around that base sizes are going to change from 25mm to 30mm. I've no idea if this is true. I think that's coming off the fact that in the pictures, the models are looking pretty chunky on their bases, so maybe it's come from that. Now, this also got me thinking a little bit when I talked about some of the Cathay releases that were teased as part of the World Championship preview. But this feels like it's Games Workshop forcing you to buy a book to find the rules that are in a book you've already bought. A compulsory purchase to get the most recent rules for a faction actually only came out quite recently. But this situation is different. We're told that in January there's going to be a new update, and that will also include these new Marauder rules. So if you were looking at feeling that you just had to get the book because you wanted to know what your opponent had access to, then, well, you'll get those rules eventually anyway, and January's not that far away. When it comes to the changes, we don't know if there's base size changes or profile changes, but we do know that they are going to be losing access to the various Marks of Chaos. Marauder units all going to be Mark of Chaos Undivided, but then being able to be part of one of four cults: the Blooded Hound, the Carrion Crow, the Slithering Serpent, and the Fell Raptor. Instead of having constant abilities, this will give them a once per game ability, which is said to be a bit more thematic. It will definitely mark out Chaos Warriors as being something a bit different if they've got some kind of continuous effect from the regular Marks of Chaos that we're already familiar with. I'll be honest, I quite like that. Adds a bit of flavour and makes the Marauders and Warriors of Chaos a little bit different. Hopefully it actually makes Warriors of Chaos become a bit more interesting and worth taking on the battlefield. It always is something as a disappointment to me that a Chaos Warrior army doesn't have Chaos Warriors in it. Obviously, with things like Wolves of the Sea, which is, I think, a popular choice, certainly competitively at the moment. Well, let's face it, they can't even have Warriors of Chaos apart from a couple of characters. We're also going to see some new traits and some new magic things. Magic items, which anyone can take, and a new Law of Magic, the Law of Shadowlands, which is going to be for all sorcerers of chaos. Things like ability to get reserve move, that'll be quite interesting, getting units speeding up the field. and spells that reduce enemy movement and leadership. Again, quite interesting, particularly if you're looking at some of the doomy sort of spells floating around in the existing laws of magic. Now, before we conclude, I want to just touch base on this new FAQ and errata update, which we're told is coming at the end of January. We're told this will include updates for armies, old and new, and is based on the feedback since the 1.5 update in July. This is potentially quite interesting and has already led to a bit of speculation about what this means. What are old and new? For me, I think new must mean Cathay. Now, we've all seen the videos and the stats, etc., which just shows how good Grand Cathay is. Winning competitively a really high proportion of games, 70+%, and being absolutely the top faction. In fact, if you do want to play competitively, or you play in an environment where competitive players seep into, so pick up games at your local club or whatever, the odds are there's going to be some Cathay around and they're just going to win because they're great. Things like the Sky Lanterns are super powerful, and they've also backed up by some really fantastic artillery. The rest of the stuff that doesn't matter so much and just adds a bit of flavour. Now, as much as I really hate the marketing method of Games Workshop bring something out, it's super amazing. People rush out, buy a load of really expensive models because they're amazing, and then the rules get nerfed heavily and you're suddenly left with a load of wasted purchases. Let's face it, Cathay really does need toning down. I'm hoping that they don't get hit so hard with the nerf stick that people are left with a lot of, let's face it, very expensive models which are frankly unusable, but that we are left with an army that fits nicely into the pack, getting a decent win rate, being interesting to play with and importantly against, but without sort of being hammered down to the levels of ridiculous, being the opposite end of the spectrum. So that for new factions, what do we mean by old factions? And I think there's two possible ways of looking at this. Firstly, you could look at, well, we're talking about the traditional factions, Empire, Dwarves, Orcs and Goblins, etc. The forces that we all know and love. There's going to be updates for everybody. However, it could be read that factions old means legacy factions, things that haven't been touched since September of 2024, so well over a year ago. We know that things like vampire counts are really strong, even ignoring the community version of the vampire counts, which is, quite frankly, when it comes to Blood Knights, even more ridiculous than they are in the main rules because of the amount of stuff that can just simply regrow. But of that, the other legends list like Skaven, Dark Elves, Ogre Kingdoms are notoriously quite weak in the current setting. So it would be really nice to see them get a little bit of a power boost. Having said that, Games Workshop have made it very clear that the Legends list weren't going to get reimagined, so anyone that's speculating in that sort of direction on the internet, it feels like it is a little bit of hopium rather than anything that's definitely going to happen. However, my track record for predictions, it's pretty poor, so who knows? If Games Workshop think it's going to sell them some models, why not update the Legends? There's some fun armies, things that really go to the core of the history of Warhammer, Dark Elves, Skaven, etc. Lizardmen even. So they're definitely things that I wouldn't be averse to seeing officially supported and just being a bit more effective and being brought into that nice middle ground when it comes to effectiveness. With Warhammer the Old World not being a mainline game, we're not going to be able to expect super regular updates, but updates about every 6 months or so, keeping the meta a little bit more interesting and helping to maintain a degree of balance is something that I think is to be applauded. And it's going to help keep the game fresh, people interested in what's going on, and just really preventing things getting a bit stale, as they were before the 1.5 errata came out. So I think there's quite a lot of positives to be drawn from the latest article. There's some interesting rules coming out. There's a new way of playing the game with this campaign system for Path to Glory. Hopefully it won't just touch on Warriors of Chaos and allow you to use these rules for other factions. I'm not going to hold my breath on that, but it would be nice to see if everyone got to play with these new style of games. And of course, we're seeing new magic items and stuff to give everyone the potential to get a little bit of a lift from the new stuff that's coming out. I've waffled on quite enough about this. I hope you found this interesting. Do let me know whether you agree with my thoughts or not. I will keep an eye on the comments section. As always, thank you very much for listening. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.